Hello, and welcome to the Intuitive Ouija. Thanks for clicking on my story. Before we begin, drop your city or country in the comments. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from. The air in the office always had this specific recycled taste to it. A flat metallic tang overlaid with the ghost of microwave popcorn and the underlying, ever-present scent of anxiety sweat. The kind that beads on the upper lip during a missed deadline, or a surprise one-on-one with a manager whose name is always in the subject line of ominous all-staff emails. And it was particularly thick that Friday afternoon, a palpable fog of forced cheer and unspoken dread as we milled around our cubicles. The cheap fabric walls seeming to lean in closer than usual, absorbing the whispers about the rumored restructuring, the impending layoffs that everyone knew were coming, but no one in authority would ever confirm, a corporate sword of Damocles dangling by a frayed thread over our heads. And I remember looking at Sarah from marketing, her desk a organized chaos of color-coded binders and a small, thriving succulent she called Bertram. How she was meticulously wiping down her keyboard with an alcohol swab, a little ritual of hers she did every Friday, her brow furrowed in concentration, creating her own small island of order in the sea of uncertainty. And Ben from IT, his large frame folded uncomfortably into his creaky chair, his fingers a blur on the keyboard as he dove deep into some line of code, probably building something elegant and efficient, a temporary fortress against the looming chaos. His headphones on, blocking out the world, a man who spoke in logic and binaries but whose eyes lately held a faint, uncharacteristic panic when the phone rang, and Leo from design, who was sketching idly on a tablet, adding absurd, beautiful flourishes to a new logo concept he knew would be rejected by the higher-ups for being too creative, his hope a stubborn, flickering flame. And we were all just waiting for the clock to hit 5 so the annual Founders Day party could begin. This mandatory fun event that felt more like a wake for our own professional futures, a ritual of cheap wine and awkward small talk designed to paper over the cracks that were widening every day. And when the moment finally came, we shuffled into the common area where a sad-looking spread of veggie platters and store-brand chips sat next to a pyramid of plastic cups and 2 giant bottles of supermarket champagne that tasted like sweetened vinegar and regret. And the music started, some generic upbeat playlist curated by HR to inspire camaraderie, but only amplifying the dissonance, and we all stood there holding our fizzy piss-yellow drinks, forcing smiles, making eye contact we immediately broke. A room full of ghosts waiting to be officially told they were dead, and our boss, a man named Richard whose smile never reached his eyes, gave a speech from atop a small step stool, his voice booming with a hollow confidence about weathering the storm together and our corporate family. A word that here, in this context, tasted more poisonous than the champagne, and I saw Mark, Richard's friend and a senior manager from another department, a man who usually wore his authority like a comfortable jacket, standing slightly apart, nursing a drink that was decidedly darker and stronger than the one in my cup, his face unreadable but tight around the eyes, a man who knew things, and the party lurched on, a grotesque pantomime of enjoyment, until someone, I think it was Jenny from accounting, let out a shrill laugh and emerged from the supply closet holding a dusty box, a Ouija board, a relic from some forgotten, ill-advised spiritual team-building retreat from years ago. And it was passed around as a joke, a curiosity, its surface filmed with a fine layer of dust that felt like ash. And we all gathered around a large circular table someone had cleared of half-eaten cheese cubes and napkins, the fluorescent lights humming overhead like a nervous audience. And someone said, "Come on, let's do it," for a laugh. And so we did, a half-dozen of us placing our fingers lightly on the plastic planchette, mine and Jenny's and Ben's and Sarah's and Leo's, and, after a moment's hesitation, Mark's, his knuckles white around his glass, his index finger resting on the edge of the heart-shaped pointer. And we started with stupid questions, the kind you'd expect. Is someone in this room secretly a millionaire? And the planchette slid lazily to an O. Does Richard dye his hair? Another swift an O. And we all giggled, a genuine, nervous release of tension, the ice momentarily broken, the absurdity of it all feeling like a relief from the oppressive corporate weight. And then someone, and to this day I cannot remember who, their voice slurred with cheap alcohol, said, "Okay, Spirit, tell us the truth. Are there really going to be layoffs?" And the mood shifted, the laughter died in our throats, and for a second nothing happened. The planchette was still under our collective fingertips, a piece of cold, inert plastic, and then it twitched, a subtle vibration that I felt travel up my arm. And it began to move, not with the jerky, uncertain motion of before, but with a smooth, chilling purpose, gliding across the board with an authority that felt alien. And it went straight to yes, and a few people gasped, a few others laughed, a sharp, brittle sound, and someone else, emboldened by the tension, said, "Prove it. Tell us what the layoff papers will say." And the planchette moved again, faster this time, spelling out pink, pausing for a breath. We all held, then slipped, and the air left the room. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees, and the laughter this time was even more strained, a defense mechanism against the creeping unease, and Jenny, her voice a high-pitched squeak, said, "You're full of it, name names, who's getting the axe?" And that's when it happened. The planchette tore across the board, a thing possessed, no longer guided by our hesitant pushes, but moving with a dreadful, knowing certainty, and it went to S, then A, then R, then A, then H, and we all looked at Sarah, whose face had gone sheet white, her fingers still on the planchette as if frozen there, and she tried to laugh it off. Very funny, guys. But the planchette was already moving again, B, then E, then N, and Ben snatched his hand back like he'd been burned, his face a mask of confusion and anger. Not cool, man, not cool. And before anyone could say anything, it spelled Leo, and Leo just stared, his mouth a little, of surprise, his sketchpad forgotten, and the planchette finally stopped, sitting dead center on the board like a period at the end of a horrifying sentence. And the silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the distant thump of the terrible music from the main room. And then Mark, his face ashen, his drink sloshing as he pulled his hand away, muttered, "I need a real drink," and stumbled away from the table, leaving the five of us staring at each other, at the board, at the letters that seemed to glow under the harsh lights. And we all quickly agreed it was a hilarious, dark joke. Someone must have been pushing it. Of course they were. It was just a stupid game. And we scattered, returning to the forced merriment of the party with a newfound desperation. The laughter louder, the conversations more frantic. A collective effort to outrun the chill that had settled in our bones. And I went home that night and tried to forget the feeling of that plastic sliding under my fingers, the cold, smooth, inevitable glide of it. But it was no use. The entire weekend was colored by a low-grade, irrational dread, a hum in the back of my skull that sounded like that planchette scraping across cardboard. And every time I checked my personal email on my phone, my heart would hammer against my ribs, a Pavlovian response to the modern-day axe. And Monday morning arrived with the grim finality of a guilty verdict. The office was quieter than usual, a tomb waiting for its occupants, the air cold and still, and we all sat at our desks, pretending to work, our eyes flicking to our email notifications every 3 seconds. And then it happened, the soft, devastating ping that echoed through the entire floor. A single email from HR with a subject line that read "Important Organizational Update." And my stomach dropped through the floor, and I clicked it open, my vision blurring as I scanned the corporate speak, the strategic realignment, the difficult but necessary decisions, the right sizing for future growth. And then I saw it, the list of those impacted, and there they were, the names in cold, impersonal 10-point font. Sarah Jenkins, Benjamin Miller, Leo Torres, and I couldn't breathe. I just stared at the screen, the words swimming in front of me. And then I heard it, a small, choked sob from the direction of Sarah's cubicle, and the sound of Bertram the succulent being placed carefully into a cardboard box. And I saw Ben, his face a thundercloud of betrayed confusion, being quietly approached by a somber-looking HR rep and a security guard I'd never seen before, his hands held up slightly as if surrendering to the sheer absurdity of it all. And Leo was just sitting at his desk, staring at his beautiful, rejected logo on the screen, his hands limp in his lap, his whole body radiating a hollow, empty defeat. And by lunchtime they were gone, their desks eerily clean, their chairs tucked in, 3 new voids in the office landscape that seemed to suck all the sound and light out of the room. And the rest of us, the survivors, we didn't talk, we didn't make eye contact, we just typed frantically, desperately, the clatter of keyboards a frantic prayer to the gods of corporate viability, a symphony of fear. And that evening, driven by a morbid, horrified curiosity, I found myself at the dive bar down the street, the one with the sticky floors and the dim lights, and I saw them there, the 3 of them, huddled at a small table in the corner, a pitcher of beer between them like a centerpiece at their own wake. And I hesitated, but Sarah saw me and gave a small, weary wave, and I approached, buying a round I couldn't afford as a pathetic form of penance for still having a job. And we sat in silence for a while, the air thick with everything unsaid, until Leo, staring into his glass, said, "Severance is a joke, just like their healthcare." And Ben snorted, "They'll probably outsource my entire team to some firm that doesn't know Java from a cup of coffee." And Sarah just shook her head. "I just can't believe it, you know. After 10 years. 10 years. And then she fell quiet again, and we drank, the bitterness of the beer matching the mood. And then Ben, his voice low and serious, said the weirdest thing happened at the party on Friday. And Leo and Sarah looked up at him, and Leo said don't. But Ben continued, "No, seriously, it was the damnedest thing. We were messing around with that stupid Ouija board." And Sarah's eyes went wide, and she said, "You were there for that too." And Leo put his glass down hard on the table. The sound a sharp crack in the quiet bar. "Wait, you were part of that? It spelled your name?" And we all looked at each other, the truth dawning not with the suddenness of a lightning strike, but with the slow, crushing weight of a glacier, a horrifying, impossible coincidence that was no coincidence at all. And Ben said it spelled all our names, didn't it? One after the other. And I nodded, my throat too tight to speak, and Sarah whispered, "Oh my God," the color draining from her face for the second time in 3 days. It was Mark, and we all knew it was true, the final piece of the awful puzzle snapping into place. The manager's friend who had been drinking with the boss, who knew the names, who had his finger on the planchette, his loose, drunken tongue, and his guilty conscience manifesting through a child's toy, broadcasting their fates. Under the guise of a party game, and the terror that washed over me then was colder and more profound than any ghost story could ever be. Because it was real, it was the terror of the utterly arbitrary, the understanding that our lives, our mortgages, our fragile sense of security, were all just entries on a spreadsheet, topics of discussion in a closed-door meeting, secrets that could be spilled by a drunk man at a party and revealed through a piece of plastic. And I went back to the office. The next day, and every day since, and it is a haunted house. Every whisper between managers is a potential omen. Every all-staff meeting a seance where we try to divine our futures, and we are all terrified of who's next, because the Ouija board called out who was getting fired. And it was right, and we thought it was a joke, but now the office is terrified of who's next, and I sit at my desk. The hum of the fluorescent lights, now the same frequency as the dread in my veins, and I stare at my computer screen until the words blur into meaningless symbols, and sometimes, in the dead silence of the late afternoon, when the typing has stopped and everyone has left, I swear I can hear it, a faint, phantom scraping sound coming from the empty conference room. The sound of a planchette gliding across cardboard, moving with a purpose all its own, and I know, with a certainty that chills me to my core, that the true monster was never in the board. It was in the building all along, wearing a suit and a smile, and it's still hungry. And the hunger is a physical presence now, a low-frequency vibration in the floor tiles that travels up through the soles of my cheap dress shoes and into the marrow of my bones. A constant reminder that satiation is only temporary, that digestion is inevitable, and we are all just nutrients waiting to be processed. And the silence in the office is no longer just the absence of sound, but an active entity, a thick, sound-absorbing gel that fills the space between cubicles, muffling the click of keyboards which now sound less like productivity and more like the frantic tapping of a prisoner counting down the seconds. And every email notification is a gunshot that makes us all jump, a collective flinch that ripples through the open plan space. And we've developed a new language, a series of glances and barely perceptible nods, A raised eyebrow that means, have you heard anything? A slight shake of the head that means nothing yet, but it's coming. And we are all amateur anthropologists now, studying the rituals of the higher-ups, trying to read the omens in their behavior. Did Richard not make eye contact with me in the kitchen this morning? Was that a sign, or is he just hung over? Did the head of HR just spend an unusually long time looking at the seating chart on the wall? Is that a new spreadsheet open on Mark's monitor? The one he quickly minimized when I walked by his glass-walled office. His face a perfect mask of bland neutrality. But I saw the flicker of something else, something like shame, or worse, pity. And the gossip now is no longer about who is sleeping with who, but about who might be next. We analyze departmental budgets with the intensity of conspiracy theorists. We scrutinize meeting invites, looking for clues in the attendee list. Is it a sign if you're not included, or a sign if you are? And the Ouija board itself is gone, vanished from the supply closet, removed by someone, sanitized, erased like a mistake. But its absence is even more potent, a ghost limb we all still feel, and every decision feels meaningless. Every completed project a sandcastle built below the high tide line. Because what does it matter if the quarterly report is perfect if your name is already on a list in a drawer somewhere? A list that was drunkenly confessed to a piece of cardboard. And I find myself watching my remaining colleagues, not as friends or allies, but as potential threats, calculating their value, their vulnerability, thinking if they go maybe I'll be safe, a horrible, selfish calculus that makes me hate myself even as I do it. And I see others doing the same. The way Jenny from accounting now always mentions how she's been working late, how she's taken on 3 new projects, her voice a little too loud, her smile a little too desperate, a performance for an audience of one, for Richard, for Mark, for the monster that doesn't watch but simply consumes, and the work itself has become a surreal parody. We are building decks and writing memos and attending Zoom calls about synergies and paradigms, all while waiting for the blade to fall. And the psychological toll is a creeping thing. I don't sleep well. My dreams are full of sliding planchettes and silent, empty offices, and I wake up tired, the fatigue-elite blanket I wear all day, and the world outside the office windows seems to have lost its color. Everything is tinged with the same gray fluorescent glow, and my life has shrunk to the dimensions of this floor, my thoughts looping in the same terrified circles, and the 3 names Sarah, Ben, Leo have become a mantra of doom, a proof of concept that it can happen to anyone, that it will happen again. And the worst part is the randomness of it, the utter lack of reason. It wasn't performance-based. Leo was the most talented designer we had. It wasn't seniority-based. Sarah had been there the longest. It was just a decision, a line item. And that's the true horror, the understanding that we are not people here. We are variables. And the equation is being solved by distant, unseen forces. And the dive bar has become our unofficial chapel, a place where we, the survivors, go to drink and whisper and try to decipher the runes. And we all avoid talking about the board directly. It's too raw, too insane, but it's always there, the elephant in the room wearing a party hat. And last night, Mike from sales, his tie loose, his eyes bloodshot, leaned in close and said, "You know, I heard from someone that the list was finalized 2 weeks ago. The paperwork was already drawn up before the party." And the bottom dropped out of my stomach all over again, because that meant Mark knew. He had known for days. He'd sat in meetings with them. He'd joked with Ben about the football game, all while knowing he was a dead man walking. And the image of his finger on that planchette, his pale, guilty face, it makes me feel sick. It was a confession, a bizarre, public absolution he granted himself using our hands, our laughter as his cover. And now, back at my desk, the hum of the computer is the only thing keeping me company. And I realize this is the new normal, this low grade terror, this constant looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next sign, the next omen, because the Ouija board called out who was getting fired. And it was right, and we thought it was a joke. But now the office is terrified of who's next. And the worst part is, the most psychologically thrilling and devastating part, is that the game is still being played, only now the board is invisible. And we are all, every single one of us, with our trembling hands placed firmly upon the planchette of our own careers, waiting for it to move. And the waiting is an exquisite form of torture. a psychological water drip designed to erode any last vestiges of professional identity we once possessed, reducing us to raw, twitching nerves encased in business casual. And the office has developed its own set of superstitions, unspoken rituals we all follow with the devotion of zealots. For instance, no one uses the microwave at 9:15 a.m. anymore, because that's when Sarah always warmed up her oatmeal, and the sound of it beeping now feels like a summoning, a ghost call that makes everyone freeze for a fraction of a second before resuming their frantic typing. And Ben's old chair in IT remains empty, a monument to him, but no one will sit in it, not even when the conference room is full and we need extra seating. We'd rather stand awkwardly against the wall than risk the perceived curse of that particular piece of furniture. And Leo's favorite pen, a specific brand of archival ink rollerball he was fanatical about, was left behind in his drawer, and I saw Jenny pick it up once, look at it, and then drop it like it was a live wire, her hand shaking, as if the mere act of touching his chosen instrument of creation could somehow transfer his fate onto her. And we've all become hyper-aware of sounds. The specific cadence of Richard's footsteps approaching our quadrant is enough to send a jolt of adrenaline through my system, my heart hammering against my ribs until he passes by. The squeak of the janitor's cart in the evening is no longer a sound of cleaning, but of erasure, wiping away the day's evidence. And every time the printer spits out a thick document, we all glance over, wondering if it's the next set of termination packets, the next wave of pink slips made manifest. And the language of the company has become a minefield. Words like efficiency and streamlining and lean methodology now carry a sinister double meaning. They are no longer goals but threats, and in meetings, when these words are uttered, you can see a subtle shift in the room, a collective intake of breath, a slight tightening around the eyes, a room full of people trying desperately not to look like the most efficient one to streamline out of a job. And my own work has suffered, my creativity has been strangled by this pervasive fear. I second-guess every decision. Every email I send is drafted and redrafted, scrutinized for any possible misinterpretation, any hint of weakness or dissent, because I am now operating under the terrifying assumption that every single thing I do is being evaluated for my eventual dismissal, that my every action is part of a continuous, silent performance review with life-altering consequences, and I find myself volunteering for the most mundane, soul-crushing tasks, not because I want to, but because I think it might make me look indispensable, the person willing to grind away at the boring stuff, while the more interesting, visible projects now feel like traps, potential platforms for failure. And the camaraderie we once had, the forced yet occasionally genuine sense of team, is completely gone, replaced by a furtive every person for themselves mentality. We hoard information, we subtly undermine each other in small, deniable ways, all while maintaining the plastic smiles and the "how was your weekend" chatter that feels more hollow and performative than ever. And I hate myself for participating in it. For the relief I feel when Mike from sales messes up a client presentation, a little voice in my head whispers, "Better him than me." And that voice is the real monster, the one the company has nurtured inside of me, the internalization of its ruthless, Darwinian logic. And at night, I lie awake, my mind racing, replaying the party, the smooth glide of the planchette, the look on Mark's face, and I wonder if he remembers, if he lies awake too, haunted by his own drunken confession, or if he's already rationalized it away, compartmentalized it as a funny story for his other manager friends. And I think about Sarah's succulent, Bertram, did she take him, or is he still there on her empty desk, slowly dying of neglect, a quiet, living testament to what happened here? And the dive bar gatherings have become more frequent and more grim, our little support group of the damned. And last time, Mike, drunker than usual, slammed his fist on the table and said, "It's not fair, it's just not fair." And we all just looked at our drinks, because fairness was a concept that died in this office. It was sacrificed on the altar of shareholder value and executive bonuses. And the only thing that's fair is that none of us are safe, that the arbitrary blade can fall on any of us at any time, and that the Ouija board was merely the universe's way of laughing at our futile attempts to find pattern and reason in the chaos. a chaos carefully engineered and monetized by the people in the corner offices. And now, as I sit here, the faint, imagined sound of that planchette scraping is a constant tinnitus in my ears. A reminder that the game never ended, it just became invisible, and we are all still playing, our fingers trembling on the piece, waiting for the next push, the next revelation, the next name to be spelled out in the cold, unforgiving air of this place. And the terrifying truth is that the board doesn't need letters to speak anymore. It speaks through the silence after a hushed conversation stops when I enter the room. It speaks through the missed invite to a meeting I should probably be in. It speaks through the forced smile Richard gives me in the hallway. A smile that doesn't reach his eyes, and it's always saying the same thing, a single, looping message of dread. You are temporary. You are expendable. You are next. And the weight of that single word, next, has become a physical thing, a leaden yoke across my shoulders that bows my spine as I walk to my car each evening. A car I'm now hyper-aware of financing, each payment a potential future folly. And I find myself calculating the months of savings I have left, the dwindling buffer between me and oblivion, and every purchase, from a gallon of milk to a new pair of socks, is subjected to a brutal internal inquisition. Is this necessary? Can I do without? Am I being frivolous with money that might soon need to last me through a winter of unemployment? And the world outside the office has become infected with the same dread. Every news headline about economic indicators or market fluctuations is no longer abstract financial news, but a personal horoscope, a direct commentary on my chances of survival. And I watch people in other jobs, the barista, the mail carrier, the construction worker, with a new, desperate envy, thinking their jobs seem so tangible, so real, so immune to the spectral whims of a boardroom, while my own existence feels like a house of cards built on a foundation of rumors and spreadsheets. And back inside the fluorescent-lit cage, the silence has mutated. It's no longer just the absence of talk about the layoffs. It's an active avoidance of any topic that could even tangentially relate to the future. No one says next quarter or this time next year anymore. We speak only in the immediate present tense, a language stripped of hope and ambition, a dialect of pure survival. And the physical space of the office itself feels different. The carpet seems to absorb more sound. The walls feel closer, the air colder and thinner, as if the building itself is conserving energy for its true purpose, which is not creation but elimination. And I've started having a recurring dream where I'm in the conference room, and the Ouija board is on the table, but it's massive, the size of the entire table, and the letters are not letters but the faces of my colleagues, their features stretched and distorted, and the planchette is a giant, cold hand. And it's my hand, and I'm the one guiding it, forced to choose which face to land on. And I always wake up in a cold sweat, my own hand clenched into a fist. And the line between the dream and the waking world has begun to blur, so that sometimes, during a particularly mind-numbing conference call, I'll look at the grid of faces on the screen and see not people but letters, and I'll mentally spell out words, testing them, seeing which combination feels most likely, which name has the right number of syllables to be sacrificed next. And this morbid game is my brain's way of trying to impose order on the chaos, to predict the unpredictable, to find a pattern in the madness, because the uncertainty is the true killer. The not knowing is an acid that dissolves your sanity drop by drop. And I find myself staring at Mark's office more and more, watching him through the glass, studying his body language, the way he talks on the phone, the expressions that flicker across his face, trying to decipher if he knows something new, if the next wave is being planned. And I see him look at me sometimes, and his gaze is unreadable, but there's a weight to it, a gravity that suggests knowledge, and I can't tell if it's pity or guilt or just the usual managerial emptiness. And the other day, I passed him in the hall and he said, "Keep up the good work." A phrase so commonplace it should be meaningless, but now it feels like a code. Is good work the work that will save me? Or is it the work of someone who is complacent, someone who doesn't see the axe coming? And I replayed those 3 words in my head for hours, trying to crack them, to find the hidden message, and I realize I'm going insane, that the pressure is turning me into a conspiracy theorist of my own life. seeing signs and portents in every corporate cliché and casual greeting. And the worst part is, I know I'm not alone. I see the same paranoid light in the eyes of my colleagues. The way we all overanalyze every all-staff email from Richard, parsing each sentence for subtext, for the hidden meaning that might reveal the timing of the next purge, and the phrase moving forward has become particularly ominous, as it often precedes bad news, so that when it appears in an email, a silent alarm goes off across the floor, and you can feel the collective tension spike, a wave of anxiety so thick you could swim in it. And we are all drowning in it, slowly, our professionalism a desperate dog paddle that keeps our heads just above the waterline. But we are tired, so tired, and the shore is nowhere in sight, only the vast, uncaring ocean of the market and the Ouija. Board was just a fleeting glimpse of the shark's fin circling beneath us, a warning we were too drunk and too scared to properly heed. And now we are all in the water, waiting for the bite.